So here we are, back again, by popular demand. So welcome, everybody, for coming to see us today, and I hope you've all been enjoying Zebu. I'm sure Stephen doesn't really need a huge introduction. You're probably eminently familiar with everything that he is and does. But it's a pleasure to be here to talk to you again this year.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate all of you hanging around to hear our conversation. Really, really appreciate it. So hopefully we can make it of value to all of you. Thank you, Alex, as well.
No problem. So, I'm the tech editor of the London Standard, which, for those of you who are not from London, is the single most important regional media outlet in London. We've been publishing since 1827, which in Web3 terms, I'm sure probably feels like thousands of years. Today we're going to be talking about quite a few different things. We're going to talk about Web3, but we're also going to talk more generally about technology, what's exciting about the future, but also about entrepreneurship, leadership, and quite a few interesting ideas that we'll get into along the way. However, what I would like to do to begin with is what we did last year, which is a couple of icebreaker questions, just to warm up the audience and get them to know the real Stephen.
Okay.
So you don't know what these are going to be, so okay. What would you say was your spirit animal?
I like to think of it as a lion, but I'm sure most of us do. Because if you go to my house or you look in my apartment, there's lots of lions because I love their temperament, the ability to be like calm and loving and to protect and to lead, but also the ability to be aggressive when you need to be aggressive in the sense of like going after a goal and all of those things. So I've always resonated with lions and then monkeys because my dad used to call me a monkey. But lions and monkeys, yeah. Monkeys are cheeky, so I like monkeys, but I think the lion is, I'm just in awe of them, so yeah.
I was going to say calm and loving wasn't the word I would think of with a lion, but I'll give you that. All right, one more. If you were going to play a sport at Olympic level that you've never played before, which would you?
It would be something like shot put or javelin, because I have a surprisingly good amount of velocity coming off my arm, which it's like a party trick of mine is to like punch those, those punching bags at things. I did one with a professional boxer who I shan't name because someone might write about it. But I'm very good with like arm velocity. So javelin, shot put, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, that's very specific, but at least you know your strengths.
I've thought about this before, so yeah. As you can tell, yeah.
All right, so let's get into it. So let's talk a bit about Web3. I think that what's interesting about Web3 is also what's difficult to define it and describe it is the fact that it actually refers to quite a few different ideas, loosely connected by things like the blockchain, etc. And I wonder, do you feel in 2024 whether the term Web3 itself is it still a sort of a meaningful phrase? Is it helpful, or is it really becoming now just the plumbing that kind of powers various other technologies?
Do you know what Web3 means?
Well,
no, this is a genuine question. Do you know what it means?
To my mind, it's the third iteration of the web from sort of the original web, which was sort of top-down, hierarchical, from Web 2, which was social, Web 3 being more distributed and open.
I think if you ask most people what it means, they'll probably give you a different answer to some degree. And I've kind of garnered this because at one point when we launched Third Web, we were asking people, because our company is called Third Web, so we're obviously playing into Web 3. And the answer is always different, which is an indicator to me that the term might not be that useful anymore, especially as a lot of these technologies have developed, because some people will tell me Web 3 includes AI and virtual reality and augmented reality and blockchain technology. But when we're building our companies and when we're hiring people, we're not hiring at Third Web, we're not hiring Web 3 developers because we might get someone that's into AI research, or we might get someone that's a specialist in virtual reality. So when I think of Web3, I think of the different technologies within there, and we kind of focus on those. So blockchain technology, I think, is a much better way and more specific way to think about it and to build a company around as a term. I find Web3 as a catch-all a little bit unspecific and therefore unhelpful. So I would say it's probably not a great term.
Yeah, I agree. Blockchain is the thing that it feels is the common thread. But it has so much baggage that it carries with it in so many ways that people seem to be more comfortable talking about Web3. Mm-hmm. I think, though, that when it, there's a danger that we get drawn too much into what something is rather than why do it. And for instance, we don't talk so much about the cloud anymore. We just accept that not everything we do is on the device that we're doing it on, right? And do you feel that's the same with Web3? We're getting beyond that, the point where we're talking about the mechanics, and we're just now thinking about ways in which it can help improve our lives?
I think so, and I think a lot in part because I get to see in the back end of Third Web and who's using Third Web. So for those of you that don't know Third Web, software business, San Francisco based, about 50 employees. We've raised about $30 million from Coinbase, who I know are here today because I just met them, from Shopify, I always get that wrong, that pisses people off. Casey Hahn Ventures, and we're one of the biggest, probably second or first biggest infrastructure software company if you're trying to build an application on the blockchain. You probably use Third Web, you might use one of our competitors. But I get to see the types of companies that are building on the blockchain every day. I get to see the chains that they're using and the apps that they're building. And in the last month, we've started work via Third Web with companies that range from A1 gaming companies that you'll probably know about to American Express are now a client of Third Web's. And no American Express user is going to know that. They're not going to realize that they're interacting with the blockchain, and why should they? And that's really that's always been, I think, everyone's prediction of what the blockchain will be, is it will become a huge part of our lives, but also an invisible part of our lives. So when you go on, I don't know, like an Adobe e-sign to sign a contract, you'll be interacting with the blockchain. You might even be using our SDKs at Third Web, but you won't know you are. In the same way that most of the things we do every day, we don't realize we're interacting with the internet. And that's really where we've always hoped to get to. It should be the case that you don't know. And it's funny because people think in the bear market, the crypto bear market, building has stopped or there's less activity going on. But the Third Web graphs show otherwise. The Third Web graphs look like this. It's been constant building through that market. It's just different types of developers, less opportunistic developers that aren't there for a money grab. And it's been a lot of serious companies. And one of the big surprising things we've seen is just a lot of gaming companies. So we hired Facebook's ex-head of gaming, who was there for, I think, about almost a decade, a guy called Atif, to lead our team. And a huge proportion, a shockingly high proportion of the companies that are building on Third Web now are gaming businesses. Yeah.
So obviously you're saying you have a unique opportunity to see what's coming down the track. Maybe what do you think is the most exciting thing that you think that will be powered by Web3 type technologies that people here may not have seen or be aware of, that we're going to see in the next couple of years?
The thing we're most bullish on, I think, from a Third Web perspective at the moment is gaming. I think it just blows the door open into what gaming can mean for the developers of the games, but also for the users of the games when in-game assets have real life value and are interoperable. So I can sell my sword that I won in this battleship game over here on eBay, or I can sell it out in the market, to my friend in the real world. And this completely changes the economy of a game, but it also provides so much untapped value for the developers of games. And I think it's pretty crazy to me that if I think forward 5-10 years, that most of the big games we play won't be built on the blockchain. The assets won't be NFTs in some form, because it's a win-win for the user and for the developer. So we started pretty wide when this whole blockchain thing became, when Web3 blew up, and we figured that we think the breakthrough use case in Web3 for a platform like Third Web will probably be in gaming. And e-commerce has been an interesting one. Every brand has a loyalty program. We're moving into a world where we're caring more and more about community than ever before, in every sense of the word, as a podcaster, as an entrepreneur, as a marketeer. So what the NFT technology allows us to do is to add some guardrails and incentives to community. So anyone that's building community, and that's e-com players, that's social media platforms, etc.
So I think it's really interesting that you've talked about assets within gaming, etc. Because I think at Zebu this year in particular, I've been really struck by the amount of companies that are talking about the approach to Web3 becoming less siloed and sort of integrating more with the non-Web3 space, whether that be, as you just said, through assets that you can win in games, whether it be through on-off ramps for sort of trading sort of crypto with fiat currency, whether it be any way in which you can kind of merge the two worlds together more effectively. And obviously that includes things like real-world assets, etc. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't want to get too drawn into the detail of this, but what I wanted to ask you was, broadly speaking, where do you stand on this? Do you think it's great that that there's going to be that sort of integration between the two worlds and that they will operate more smoothly together? Or, whereas some purists who are maybe a bit more sort of within the Web3 space might think, well, you know what, actually, we were going to change things. We were going to build a different world that was not going to run on the original systems that were there historically. So do you think that it's better that the two worlds are coming together, or do you think that one should try and replace the other somehow?
I just think romance doesn't really benefit anyone in this regard. And I think when it comes to first principles, you're building technology to make people's lives better, faster, cheaper, easier. And you should focus on that versus your romantic ideology about how it will happen. And you should focus on why and what you're trying to achieve. So whenever in any facet or walk of business, someone gets too romantic about their ideology, I think it's like you're drunk at the wheel.
Yeah.
And you need to go back to first principles. What are we building? Who are we building it for? And why are we doing this? And usually when you focus in on first principles, you rapidly increase your probability of being successful. Because all the other stuff is a lot of it's emotion, and it clouds judgment. So, yeah.
No, I agree. It's the center of the golden circle. Why are we doing this is the important.
And this is really important in Web3 and just anyone building in the blockchain, because the first sort of wave that we saw in Web3 and the blockchain was a lot of hopium and a lot of scammy behavior and a lot of I'll just add the word Web3 or blockchain to anything and I'll raise money for it and hope people will use it. But if you stay loyal to first principles, it's all about how does building on the blockchain make a thing that human beings want to do that they can't currently do as easy, faster, or cheaper, better. And this is why I was so hesitant to engage in building an application on the blockchain or launching an NFT collection, because I just kept coming back to if it can be done by email, I'll say this in a simple way, if it can be done by email, if there's already current technology that will enable me to do it decently well, then actually I'm not really solving a problem here. And a lot of what I saw at conferences, not this conference, but other conferences I went to in the Web3 blockchain space was, we are going to launch a community for entrepreneurs with NFTs. And I go, why the fucking NFT? Why the NFT? Oh, because then everyone gets one. Well, you could give them, I don't know, you could give them something else. You could give them something in Web2. You can give them all a password to a portal. And it's funny because when you have to interrogate yourself. You have to really honestly interrogate yourself whenever you're building anything, because realize that it's your time on the line. And there's nothing more important in your life than investing your time in something that was flawed from the get-go. And it's when the market crashes that you realize that all of it sort of screams into focus. So if you're building something in this space, you have to really be able to articulate why the blockchain enables it to be better in a way that you wouldn't have been able to do without the blockchain. So you could say to the same people, the example I gave of I'm building a community of entrepreneurs and they all get an NFT, it's a blockchain thing. Would you be able to do that without the blockchain? And the amount of businesses I saw that came to me for investment that were saying things like, it's a loyalty club and you buy the NFT and then you get to come to some event. Does the event suck?
Yeah.
Is a really good thing. And why an event? Because if you just remove the blockchain, would anyone want to come to the event anyway? Is the event of any inherent value? And I just think this is a really important first principle exercise, that this constant approach on what's the first principle, who am I solving for, and what am I actually doing here, helps you sort of stay away from spending 5 years of your life building something that absolutely nobody wants. But there was some interest because the price was going up.
Well, that always helps.
Yeah.
Okay, so one more thing. I wanted to, before we move on from Web3, I want to just ask you about London in particular. And do you feel that London is a good hub for Web3? I know it's a great hub for technology generally, but do you feel like it is
I mean, it is right now, but I just hope the government don't mess up entrepreneurship too much with some of their policies that are coming up, because I think it's a real risk in a way that I don't think the average person would realize unless you were an entrepreneur building a business. How much people do factor in the environment, the city, the taxation policy, the amount of investors that are in that market when it comes to deciding where to build their companies. And obviously a lot of my friends in Web3 have gone off to Dubai. They're out in Lisbon at the moment. And this matters. This matters because, as an investor who has a fund where we invest in companies, it's increasingly difficult to find the best talent in these emerging technologies in the UK.
Really?
Yes.
Not so, when you say in the UK, do you mean across the whole UK or London specifically?
I think it's just getting more increasingly difficult. It's okay now. There's a lot of great builders and technologists here, but when I think about Third Web, my company in San Francisco, I just think they just have such an unfair advantage on anyone trying to do the exact same thing here. And I remember the first time I went into the Third Web office when we settled down in this building next to the Golden Gate Bridge, and I'm in there, and it's Third Web lives in this sort of my co-founder's office called F Inc. And I'm sat there, we're with the Third Web team, and the kid behind me is building a headset which uses your brainwaves to play you music to make you relax. And he's chatting to one of the other guys at Third Web about his call with Andreessen Horowitz, and they're giving him advice on how to raise 20 million because the call's in 5 minutes. And this guy over here is chatting about the conversation I had with Y Combinator, and they've got the call with them in 15 minutes. And they're both ex-Meta employees. And I was just thinking, and then also, they're all staying all weekend because on Saturday and Sunday, they don't go home, they hack. They build new tools that are outside the current business that they're building. And they ship. It's this religious. It's this the religion of shipping at light speed, working all weekend and shipping at light speed. And I sat there and go, "Fuck me! Imagine if you're in Cornwall." Do you know what I mean? And you don't know the language. The dude sat here doesn't know the lead LP at Andreessen Horowitz, and the guy here doesn't go for dinner with his wife on Tuesdays, and you don't have the talent pool. And I go, oh God, I'm never investing in bloody tech in Cornwall ever again. You know what I mean? I'm like, and I think London runs a risk of moving closer into obscurity as it relates to talent, capital, and mentality. Nobody ever talks about mentality of building, but it's one of the things I noticed there. Their mentality towards building a product is so different to Cheshire and the entrepreneurs in Manchester whose businesses I look at. Mm-hmm. If you look at the speed in which Third Web ship massive new features, it's like one a day. And it's just because of this religious mentality that they have over there, because they're surrounded by builders. So I just hope London and the government, the new government, really understand entrepreneurship and innovation, and they back it.
Sure, but it could also be quite an exciting time as well. A lot of optimism, and obviously London has a lot of its historic strengths, which, financial services and, lots of technical skills here associated with fintech in particular. I know I'm not going to sit and pitch in London, but, so it's wait and see then as far as you're concerned.
I think we are at a very interesting moment in the history of all of our lives, especially as entrepreneurs and technologists, where this new technology has strolled in. The blockchain is one of them, but the bigger one is, frankly, artificial intelligence. And I think it's profound in a way that nobody can grasp. And I think that creates a threat and a massive opportunity.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about this, actually, because we had this chat last year, and you were, quite frankly, quite down about AI, and you felt like it was going to be the end of everybody's career because the robots are going to replace us, essentially. And I just wondered, a year on, many of us, at least I hope, still have a job. And are you feeling any more optimistic about AI this year?
So I never worry. I think I have to just preface everything I'm going to say with that. So I never worry about technology. And there's really three camps of people. And this will play out in this room as I talk about what I'm about to say. Camp number one, the analogy I always give is if this room was on fire, there'd be someone who was screaming that the room was on fire. We know the room is on fire. We can all see that. It doesn't help anybody to just scream that the room is on fire. Camp number two is the paralyzed person who is so overwhelmed by what's going on that they do nothing. And then camp number three is the person that's where the room is on fire. And they exert and invest all of their energy, not on screaming about it or panic, but just getting us out of the room. What's the plan? Those are your leaders. If you work in a business, you know who that person is, and you also know who the screaming person is. But also, as I say this, the second thing I want you to be aware of is what I was saying out there to some people, which is this idea of cognitive dissonance, which is a term coined by Leon Festinger, which describes the feeling you get when new information contrasts and contradicts what you already know, or something that threatens you. So the example I gave out there was if you're a smoker and you see yourself as a healthy person, you want to be healthy, and I point out that smoking's bad for your health, your brain will make you go, yes, but. And that's an attempt to alleviate the dissonance, to sort of square off one of the two things that are in contradiction. So you'll say, yes, but it helps me with stress. Yes, but it helps me lose weight. That's everyday cognitive dissonance. So as it relates to AI, when we talk about how disruptive this technology is, and if you're a lawyer, you're an accountant, you're a podcaster, you're, whatever, any sort of really intelligence-based job you have, driver, that's the biggest profession in the world. That's intelligence. And if you don't believe me, then go to San Francisco, you'll see the Waymo cars driving on the streets right now with no driver. You can order it on your phone and book a trip with no driver. And you probably saw Elon's robo cyber taxi thing last night that they announced. No drivers, just cameras, and Waymo use LiDAR. So, and also, when you look at the stats on that industry in particular, and I'll stress this industry because it's the biggest profession in the world, you're like 1,000 times more likely to die if a human's driving you than if the level 5 autonomous cars are driving you, statistically. So it's more dangerous. So like, you ask yourself from first principles, who would you rather drive? Steve, okay, I don't drink anymore, but let's just say, Steve, who likes a dabble of wine and gets tired, who would you like to drive your children? Or the AI, who has 1,000% better track record, 1,000x better track record, doesn't get tired, doesn't drink alcohol, doesn't get distracted by TikTok memes. Who do you want to drive your kids? First principles will win out if you just wait long enough. And it's the same in every industry. Who do you want to do your legal contracts? The lawyer who's talking in big words, in part, so that they can increase the invoice? Because they're just like playing for time, and they're going to charge you 50x? Or would you like a very smart artificial intelligence who has a 190 IQ on 1,000 degrees? And if, like, one simple way, because I've interviewed Mustafa Suleyman, who's the head of Microsoft AI. I've interviewed Mo Gawdat, who was ex-Google X. I've interviewed many of these people. One simple way they described it to me is, if you imagine Steve Bartlett here with my IQ, let's say my IQ is 100, on a good day, and you've got Alex here, you've got another Steve Bartlett sat here, and his IQ is 120, which is roughly what they predict the current large language model's IQ is. But his IQ is 120 in everything. Every subject. He's got a degree of 120 IQ in every subject. Right now, what would you give me to do versus him? What tasks or chores? But that's now. Imagine any rate of improvement. Let's do 10% improvement in his IQ per year, which is not even close to the rate of improvement of these large language models. His IQ is going to get to 300, right? He's going to have a 300 IQ in everything. At that point, what do you give me to do versus him? And if you think about that as just a nice first principle thought exercise, it kind of speaks to the future we're heading towards. And I don't know who can argue this point. It's not to say humans won't have anything left to do, because they will. And here's the upside. When I speak to billionaires, when I listen to Sam Altman speak about the future, one thing they all say to me privately, but also Sam Altman said in that video, is that in a world where productivity explodes through the roof, there's this wonderful opportunity for humans to do enjoyable things with all the free time they're going to have, to put it simply. And some of my friends who are billionaire investors here in London are investing in AI and basically oxytocin, which is like anything that gets people out, entertainment-centric things. They're buying football clubs at record rates. Anything that gets us back into real life, entertainment, joy, movie studios, all those things. And put simply, this billionaire said to me in London, he goes, people are going to have so much fucking free time that I now need to start investing in things for them to do with it. Entertainment. And that's the silver lining. And if you think this is bullshit, one thing to ask yourself is, why did Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, make his second company, WorldCoin, which is a platform to distribute universal basic income, to give out money in a world where productivity is so high that that we basically, as governments and societies, need to distribute capital to people. It's no surprise that these people are building universal basic income startups and AI at the same time. So what do you do about this information? The first thing I would recommend doing is, and all this is always the case, is just to lean in and to understand the technology And to really make it a hobby of yours to understand what's going on in AI, because especially in the near term, there's just huge generational opportunities in that. And one of the things that I'm thinking a lot about is how I invest in oxytocin. Like how I get involved in helping people that are currently very lonely and disconnected and don't have community. And actually, this is much of the reason why I think Web3 has been so successful, because it's not just about decentralization. It's not just about picking this shit coin, this meme coin that's going to the moon. It's solving for loneliness, and it's solving for community. And it's really incredible that this thing that stands the chance to help you create value is also making you belong somewhere. That's what meme coins are much of the time. It's, yeah, I'm at the roulette table or whatever, but also like I belong somewhere. I've got some friends. I've got some purpose. I've got a cult. I've got a tribe.
So just to summarize, then you would say that the advent of AI means that we'll be doing more menial tasks, have much more leisure time, and we should be focused on community. So maybe we should all open a surf shack in Cornwall after all.
Honestly, if only it scaled, I'd be doing it. But yeah, menial's maybe not the right word, because they will be equally important in the world we live in. And the time horizon here is what people argue about. I don't think many people argue about the destination. Not smart people that I've met with, but it's just the time horizon. And it could be 20 years before this sort of reality that I'm talking about is reality. Or it could be 5. And it all depends, I think, on what a lot of people describe as AGI and how quickly that's upon us, and then how quickly it proliferates and impacts the world. So I've got to say, what am I doing about it? Like, what am I doing about it? I am continually double guessing myself and assuming that I'm wrong about so many things. As a podcaster, I can play you a podcast that we've produced with AI that if I hadn't told you, no one in this room would know was AI. You probably heard, was it Notebook LM, which exploded like a couple of weeks ago? Just imagine any rate of improvement, 5% a month. What happens to podcasters like me? If you haven't heard of Notebook LM, it's unbelievable. It has the imperfections and intonations of 2 human beings talking, and it can be pulled together like this in 60 seconds. So what am I doing as a podcaster? Why on earth would you want to hear me interview Boris Johnson? Or me talk about any subject that we've talked about today, when in the morning you could wake up to a personalized 1-hour podcast that knows you. It knows exactly what you want, and it knows exactly how many minutes you have before you arrive at work. And it's going to give you all of that in a personalized podcast, drawing from the entirety of everything that's happened on planet Earth today. Why on earth would you want to take the risk of clicking a podcast and it potentially being shit? So you play this forward and you go, okay, so how do I play as a podcaster in a world where the cost of producing a podcast goes to 0? Don't need a studio, don't need a microphone, don't need a guest, don't need to fly a guest in, don't need any of those things. And this is what I think about. I have to disrupt myself. I have to basically take on myself. Because if you don't, as one of my favorite books of all time, The Innovator's Dilemma, speaks to, someone else does. And just to round off on this point, the example I always give is, and this is why people don't disrupt themselves. The example I always give is like the horse and carriage industry in the 1800s. If I'm the CEO of a successful horse and carriage industry in the 1800s, and someone comes along, one of my team members, and they say, boss, I've got an idea. And I say, what is it? They say, cars. I go, okay, are any of our current customers asking for cars? They go, no, none. I go, okay, are we any good at making cars? No, we've never made one before. Okay, right. Do we have the supply chain set up to make cars? No. Okay, are any of our people experts in cars? No. Okay, get the fuck out of my office. Someone else comes in and they say, boss, faster horses, what do you think? I say, interesting. Any of our clients want it? All of our clients want it. Supply chain, is it set up to deliver faster horses? We can get there. Do our people know how to do horses? All of them know how to do horses. I say, we're doing the fucking horses. The horses don't kill you, the cars kill you. The downward opportunity. And the downward opportunity, like cars, always starts worse. It always looks shit when it arrives. Cars could only go 10 miles an hour, and there was a law called the red flag law where you had to walk in front of it with a red flag. And they broke all the time, and they were super expensive, so who wants a car? So no one pursues cars. And it's the same in all of your industries. Same in podcasting, same in software.
Well, it's true. When camera phones first came out, they were talking about whether or not they should change the law to force them to make a sort of shutter sound, because people were scared that people would be taking photos with phones, and people wouldn't know that they were having their picture taken, and it would somehow be damaging to society. But we quickly moved on from that, and it just becomes part of the fabric of what we do. Talking, moving on, I'm mindful that I really want to talk to you about some broader topics to do with entrepreneurship, and we've talked a lot about AI, so let's move to the next subject.
Can you hear me, by the way? At the back? Yeah, okay. Yeah, good, thank you.
So I was really interested to hear you talk recently about the idea of a personal manifesto, and in the sense that people don't need necessarily a business plan anymore, and that they can have a much more streamlined document that they can use instead, which you call a manifesto. I wondered if you could maybe explain what you mean by that, and in particular as an investor, do you think that that we may be getting to a point where people want to see a more concise document that summarizes the ethos of what you're trying to do rather than all the detail? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I've never made a business plan in my life, so I have to preface that with this, because I just think they're pointless. And I think the old school, in GCSE business, what they told me was a business plan is just a load of shit. Frankly, it's like a bunch of lies in a document, a bunch of hopium. It's a document of hopium. So these days, most business plans I get are 10 slides long, and they're really about storytelling. And no matter what walk of life you're in, you have to realize that there's nothing more compelling than storytelling. And there's no graph as compelling as a great story. And also the brain is set up in such a way where if you want to penetrate the brain, you want to tell an emotional story. That's just the way our brains as humans work. So yeah, I think it's much more better to have a story-centric 10-page deck, which is about narrative, about story arc, than anything else.
Listen, I'm a big believer in the power of storytelling myself, so I'm totally with you on that. But okay, that brings me to my next question. So for business people generally, especially, and also in particular founders, whether they're Web3 or any other industry, what makes them superhuman most? Would it be the power of storytelling, or would it be the learning from their own mistakes, or having the guts to chase the dream?
It's all of the above in life, and I think this is an important point, because when you're asked a question like this one, sometimes it pushes you out of nuance. And I say this because I was talking about this the other day to some people. I was saying that you've got to make sure in your life that words don't fuck you up. And the example I gave is the example I talk about sometimes in my book, where like you come home with your new girlfriend or boyfriend and your mum says to you, "Is it love?" Now that question is a trap, because love is a four-letter word, and you've used it to describe peanut butter and your French bulldog before. And is it love begets a yes or no answer. So immediately you're like trapped, and then you because it sounds like a legitimate question, or the phrase sounds legitimate, you then are forced to answer. But a lot of questions sound legitimate, but they're invalid. And I think I say this because so much of your life is governed by questions you're trying to answer. Is this my passion? Is it love? And most of those questions are invalid questions. I could say, what number is orange? All the core components of that phrase are legitimate. Oh, you know what orange is. You know what a number is. You know the rest of, they're all English words. But it's not, that's an invalid question. Most of the questions we try and answer to build our lives on are invalid questions. And so in the case of this question, it's all of the above. It's all of the above, they all matter. The other thing that I was thinking as you were speaking is just the importance of people, which I didn't know until about 2 to 3 years ago as an entrepreneur. I didn't realize how much of the game that you play as an entrepreneur, or regardless of what you're building, is about your ability to recruit exceptional people. But as I look through the writings and the work of people like Steve Jobs, and I interview Walter Isaacson, who's the only person who went behind the scenes with Elon Musk for 2 years, and then behind the scenes with Steve Jobs before he died. And I remember saying to Walter Isaacson, what's the most important thing you learned from Steve Jobs before he died? And he goes, I was in his back garden in San Francisco before he died. And I asked him, I said, what's the best product you've ever built? And I expected him to say the iPhone or the iPad or the Mac. And he turned to me and he said, the team. He goes, because the team built everything that I've just named. And I know this sounds simple, but if you think about how much time as a founder or an entrepreneur, you're actually investing in the product versus building and finding a great team, this kind of draws into focus the kind of delusion that sits behind company building. And because of this, over the last 2 to 3 years of my life, I spend about 30 hours a week recruiting. So every single day I'm interviewing people. This morning I was in an interview for 2 hours. My managing director who's joined, called Amy, the youngest woman to ever build a $100 million recruitment business. I think she's actually the youngest CEO of a 9-figure company in the UK. I interviewed her and met her for 6 months, from January until when she started. I met her at 6 a.m. in airports. I met her in Manchester in boardrooms in the back end of a hotel. I met her in so many restaurants in London. I spend so much of my time trying to find these truly great people because hindsight has taught me that that's actually the game. The definition of the word company is group of people. Steve Jobs says in that interview that I watched, he says, people think they give me all the credit for the businesses that I've built, but he goes, I've built my career on doing the excruciatingly difficult work of finding truly exceptional people. And he goes on to say, and the great thing is when you do that, it propagates. And what he means by that is what I found out, which is exceptional people, guess who they hire? Exceptional people. And shitty people, guess who they hire? Shitty people. Like I can quantify this for you. I'm thinking of a guy that I know some of you know in this room that I hired when I was younger. And of the 10 people he hired, himself and everyone he hired was removed from the business. Then I think of Katie Leeson. Katie Leeson, who I hired from Mediacom. She'd been there for 20-odd years, I think. She'd been working in the industry for 20-odd years. A player. Of the 10 people she hired, 9 of them became my company's A players. They lifted the burden off my back. So I look at my family office and I go, okay, said to my brother who runs my family office, I said, can you tell me where the value of my family office has originated from? And he said to me, he goes, really, at the end of the day, what you did is it was about 9 or 10 people that you've hired in the last couple of years that are responsible for 90% of the value downstream because of decisions they made and people they hired. So as an entrepreneur, what I'm saying to you is if you want to build a truly great business, if you want to build an amazing product, you want to disrupt your industry, divert a huge proportion of your time upstream, which is to hiring exceptional people. Last thought experiment I'll give you, and this is total like BS and obviously unrealistic, but if you had managed to hire Steve Jobs, let's play out the scenario that you hired Steve Jobs, got the best out of him, and set him a vision that was worthwhile, you, as the founder of that business, would have been, logically, the benefactor of a $2 trillion business. Because Steve Jobs went on to create a $2 trillion company. So if you had hired him, and you'd got the best out of him, and set him a culture and a vision that was inherently worthwhile, you would have been the benefactor. And hopefully this starts to shift your brain as to like what your job is as a founder and entrepreneur. It's not to work really, 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 really hard till you die and to have great ideas yourself. It's to go and find exceptional people and do the excruciatingly difficult thing of persuading them to come and join your mission. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying about storytelling, because how'd you get them there? How did Steve Jobs get his team there? Well, he says he went and told really, really powerful stories to those key execs. Yeah.
So let's delve a little bit deeper into the idea of building a business. And I'd like to rewind a little bit to more sort of startups and founders, who are just beginning on this journey. And the one thing I find when I work with and advise companies about storytelling is there's, especially in the tech space, is that there's a huge desire to sit on secrecy. They feel like they've just got to keep everything here until it's suddenly ready for that ta-da moment, and then they suddenly want to just press the button and have it all go. Mm-hmm. But we both know that's not how it works. You need to build your tribe and find your tribe over, and have that sort of community of people who will not only evangelize about what you do, but also give you the feedback to help you get there. Amen. How do you balance that? Because people, how do you balance that need? There's a certain need for commercial secrecy. I get that, with that that openness that enables you to build community from the get-go. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I see this a lot. When I was younger, I didn't want to tell people my ideas because I thought they'd steal them. And as you mature and you become an investor yourself and you meet all these entrepreneurs, you realize that that's really, really a crazy thing to do. And if you're, it's so cliche, but the value is not the idea. And the thing that you're hiding from the world, there's, I think also about that phrase where, I think it was an Einstein quote where he said, there's no such thing as a new idea. There really isn't. There's just different ways of executing upon it. And if someone can steal your idea and therefore they steal all the value, you really don't have anything of value. The value is in the execution. It's how you attack the problem and who you attack it with. And also, for almost every business, you just never know which person or conversation is going to change your life. So you should increase the amount of people that are aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it. And if it's stealable, it's not valuable. Imagine me keeping, I'm going to launch a podcast, keeping that a secret. But, if that was the value of the thing I'm doing and someone could steal it, then it's not valuable anyway. So that's always in me a sign of entrepreneurial immaturity, is when someone will approach me and say, I've got this unbelievable idea, Steve, but I need you to sign an NDA before I tell you what it is. It's just a misunderstanding of how unbelievably busy I am and how many of my own ideas I'm struggling with, let alone wanting to take one of yours. So, yeah.
Yeah, I worked with this founder once who said he always wanted that kind of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid moment where the Mexican army suddenly appear out of nowhere and they turn to each other and go, where do these guys come from?
Yeah.
It's that, every founder wants to be the kind of, have that huge surprise upon the world, when actually that's just not how it works, right?
The only ways this kind of makes sense to me is, number one, if you're hoping to do a big press release, so you don't want it to leak out just yet, because then it might hurt the press release, the big bang sort of launch moment. I get that makes sense. And the other thing is, there's sometimes operational secrets about the way you do things, which you'd rather not the world know once you're up and running. So there's things about our businesses that we kind of don't want, I wouldn't say on stage. I wouldn't tell you the specifics about how we do it on stage. I would tell you that we do it, but I wouldn't tell you how we do it, because it is kind of letting a little bit of the cat out of the bag. So
fair enough. Time is against us, but I want to get one more question before we wrap. I can't let you be here and not talk about sort of Dragon's Den and some pitching advice. And last year I asked you what your tip for someone who pitching was, and you said it was the power of storytelling. But we've already talked about that.
Yeah, okay.
So let's focus a little bit. So what advice would you give to people who are pitching an idea, whether to investors or whoever, and they're just finding that their confidence is wobbling and the ground is opening up? How do you take control of the moment and stay focused?
So the first thing I'd say is you have to realize what the law of averages is, which is a very simple thing I learned when I was 16 years old and I got a job in a call center selling double glazing, which is I would call people. So after school, I'd go to this call center. I was working there part-time. And after a while, you realize that about 80% of people are going to tell you to fuck off. And but they're gonna really mean it, because if you call someone at 9 p.m. at night when they didn't expect your call and it's a cold call, and you're trying to send them windows, doors, and conservatories or artificial grass, they're within their right to tell you to F off. About 10% of the people will tell you to go away, but they'll say it in a nice way. And then there's this last percentile, this smaller group, this 5 or 10% of people who will listen and are convertible. They're convertible if you get your pitch right. So the first thing is to understand the law of averages. You need to send more emails. And to me, it's staggering that so many founders and entrepreneurs and people building businesses send 3 to 4 emails, get rejection emails, or just get ignored, and they give up. If you plot the path of my career, when I was 18 years old in Plymstock School in the UK, the amount of emails I sent to get those free vending machines for the entirety of my school. You look at when I was in Moss Side at 18 years old, and I sent 30 or 40 emails to camera companies, basically begging them to send me free cameras so I could build my startup. Samsung and a company called Vivo replied. Samsung sent the cameras, £10,000 worth of cameras to my door within 40 hours of getting the email. And sometimes when I'm on stage, I show the email that I sent and their response. But if I hadn't have sent 40, the odds wouldn't have been stacking in my favor. And most people don't do this. They don't realize that the game is send 100 emails, send 200 emails. Once you've got the law of averages thing figured out, the next advice I'll give you is advice that I got from a CIA agent who I had on my podcast, a guy called Andrew Bustamante, whose job was to go undercover as a spy for the USA and to get people's secrets, and to get very interesting people's secrets. Not like Dave and Joanna, I'm talking like the head of the Iranian nuclear program's personal secrets. He said to me, you all have 3 lives. Your public life, which is what you brought here today, your private life, which is what maybe the person that sat next to you knows about, and then your secret life. And your secret life is the affair you're having, the strip club you're going to on the low when you're away. He said his job was to get someone's secret life within 9 months of meeting them, because then he had leverage over them, then he could get broader secrets. And I asked him how he did that, and he said it's this framework he would use called RICE: reward, ideology, coercion, and ego. Reward is, money and the things we want. Ideology is who you want to be. Doing this is good for your family. Doing this is good for your country. C is coercion, which is pressure. That's sending someone an email and being a bit shitty because they haven't replied quickly. All the negative stuff that you do, holding a gun to someone's head, that's coercion. And then the last one's ego, and he said everyone has an ego. Mother Teresa has an ego. She wanted to be seen as being good, not just Donald Trump, Mother Teresa too. And in terms of power, he said ideology is the most effective. Understanding the world through the person you're speaking to. And he then said ego is the second most powerful. Reward is the third most powerful, which is not what most people think. And coercion is the least powerful, and you should probably never use it. Because he said to me, once you hold a gun to someone's head, they don't trust you ever again. And when I look back at the email that I sent to Samsung to get those cameras, I deployed all 4 of those things. And I'll tell you how I deployed them. The first one is ideology. I went on Samsung's website, found their mission statement, Control-C, Control-V into my email. And the way I did that is like, I said, and I've put the email up on the screen before, I said, Samsung's mission was about empowering creators. I aligned with that. We're starting this business to empower creators. So I spoke to them through their ideology. And this is important for investors, because every single investor you email, every single person that you interview to join your company has an ideology. Who do they want to be? Who do they want to be seen as? The most important thing. Number 2 is ego. And what I would do is I would reference the award that the head of X company won last night. It's an incredible award you won. I've seen that that's playing to someone's ego. We all have an ego, including me. Number 3 is reward. And in that email, which I sent to Samsung when I was 18 years old, I said, every single video that we shoot with this camera across campus, right, we're going to put your logo on the video. Plus, the people in our community, our student community, are all future videographers and photographers. So they're going to grow up with an affinity towards Samsung. And the last one's coercion. I did use a little bit of coercion. The bottom of the email, it says, we're in conversations with Panasonic, but we think you're a better partner. And that's how and just funnily enough, when I get emails from people now, I look at it through the lens of, and I can't even help myself. I still fall for it. It's like, how have they played to my ideology? Have they been on my website and seen what I'm saying I want to achieve in the world? How have they tickled my ego? I love your fucking book, Steve, chapter 12. And then what reward are they offering me for giving me 5 minutes of my time or something else? And then coercion's a delicate balance to strike, so I'd probably just stay away from it.
Talking of coercion, I feel like we're going to get hauled off stage if I don't wrap this up, because we're on a tight time slot. We could talk all day, but it's an absolute pleasure. Stephen Bartlett, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.